All right, welcome back to Lafayette Square. If you joined us yesterday, you know that we were cut short at the very end of our broadcast by the Secret Service, which came by to clear out the entire public park. We learned later that it was because the South Korean president was coming through. The president was actually not coming through the park, but this is the United States of America, and so they take a rather exaggerated precautions when they're doing these things. And what you guys missed, but you can catch it on my Twitter feed, it's probably a few tweets down. As we were folding up and we were on our way out, this Polish crew that was next to us refused to shut down, really ticking off the Secret Service to the point where one of the officers pulled out his handcuffs and threatened to arrest them. That's when I pulled out my phone and I was like, oh wow, we're about to see a journalist get arrested on live TV here. Instead, the journalist started walking backwards and continuing to do his stand-up the entire way out in Polish, followed by his cameraman who was carrying the tripod. It wasn't like he had the camera up on his shoulder, following through this snaking crowd of tourists that was also being kicked out by the Secret Service. That was how we ended yesterday. Hopefully today we will end voluntarily. We're here to talk about single payer though today, specifically the fight in California over the single payer bill. And we want to talk mostly about the thing that never gets talked about, and it is the very real, almost potentially fatal obstacle to the single-payer effort in California, which isn't being talked about by any of the advocates. We're going to talk about why that is and what it is. Specifically what it is known as Proposition 98, which says that anytime you spend $1 in California, half of that has to go to either K through 12 or community college. In other words, if you want to invest $200 million, $200 billion in healthcare in California, you actually have to come up with $400 billion. They don't talk about that because it puts the price tag at a place where all of a sudden you don't have the same number of votes that you had before. And instead, they're blaming the Assembly Speaker for for killing the single payer pony. Now, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, and so to bring in some of that texture, joined here by my Intercept colleague, Zed Jelani. Anything you would take issue with in the way that I characterize that, or any more context you think people need?
Well, one, I think the Proposition 98 context is really important because California sort of has a unique tax situation. It's had that since sort of the tax revolts in the 1970s. And that's certainly an obstacle that needs to be tackled. However, I do think that while the proponents should be more honest about that and that this might end up being a sort of a voter referendum drive to overturn that as well as to push the taxes necessary for single payer, I do think that we need to be honest also about the opponents. For instance, the Assembly Speaker, Rendon, has said that he doesn't think that single payer should be a holy grail of progressivism, meaning that he sort of opposes this on sort of principled grounds. He doesn't think it's necessarily a desirable goal or a needed goal, despite the fact that the last national polls showed that only 11% of Democrats nationwide oppose single payer health care. The majority of independents support single payer health care.
It reminds me of when the kind of centrists and Obama during the health care fight started saying the same thing about the public option. Like, this is not the be-all, end-all of healthcare reform. It's just a sliver, I think, was an Obama quote at the time, upset that people were using the public option as a proxy.
Well, here's the really important thing, too. Last election, California actually had a referendum around drug pricing that lost, and a big part of the reason it lost is because the Democratic Party stayed neutral, and a lot of Democrats opposed it, and a lot of liberal and progressive-leaning groups also opposed it, who are funded by pharma. If the political party itself is not willing to throw its resources behind, let's say, a voter referendum on something like single-payer, it's not going to pass. And so I think they're kind of putting their thumb on the scale there.
Sure, they are, but here's my counter-argument to that one, is that the California Nurses Association and the other advocates behind single-payer aren't pushing for the referendum, so they're not putting the Democrats on the spot. Instead, they're saying, look what the Assembly did to our bill, implying that if the bill had passed, we'd have single payer as long as Jerry Brown would sign it into law. I want to read this one line from David Dayen's piece. He can't join us right now because he's out in Los Angeles. He lives in California, so he's been following this for years. He is quoting here from SB 562, the single payer bill. Quote, "There are several provisions of the state constitution that would prevent the legislature from creating the single-payer system envisioned in the bill without voter approval." So this is from the text of the Senate bill, saying explicitly that the state constitution would block the bill from creating single payer, the single payer bill.
Well, one of the reasons in terms
we don't hear anything about that, right?
Well, here's the thing, though. One of the reasons that state legislatures and people who do ballot referendums do it this way is that first they have to say they went through a legislature. A lot of people are very, very skeptical of sort of voter-driven ballot referendums if they don't go through the legislative process first. And this is actually what I was hearing a month or two ago from people who are generally supportive of this, is that actually that's kind of what they wanted to do. They knew they would fail in the assembly. They knew they would fail in the legislature. A lot of Democrats, unfortunately, are not throwing their weight behind this, and I think they will end up going that route. But I do think Dave Daines making a good point. They should be honest about that, and now is the time to start moving to that route, because obviously the assembly has a number of reasons why it doesn't seem like it's going to go forward. So,
right. And now, TYT colleague David Sirota. By the way, any questions that are coming up? Our TYT colleague David Sirota has covered this issue pretty closely and has written and broadcast a lot about the number of contributions that have gone towards Democrats who are either skeptical or opposed to single payer, as well as the amount of kind of pharma funding that Jerry Brown himself has gotten. And he actually highlighted a particular video that you uncovered. You want to tell people about what you found on Jerry Brown's record?
Yeah, so again, Jerry Brown is not talking about constitutional issues.
And this is the governor of California for people who are not from California.
The governor is not talking about constitutional issues or procedural issues, which I think are legitimate and that should be discussed. Instead, he's basically saying, I don't know if this can be paid for. I don't know if it's, if it's a good, effective system. But what's interesting is that in 1992, when he ran for president, he basically said, yeah, all 50 states could do this because they would end up saving a lot of money. Because when you take that private insurance middleman out of the picture, you get a lot more efficiency. I mean, hospitals and doctors don't have to pay for people to do paperwork, to manage 1,400 insurance companies or however many there are. So I think Jerry Brown, version 2017 should maybe listen to Jerry Brown version 1992 and support whatever it takes to get this system passed in California instead.
One reason I'm glad that Dave wrote this piece, I'm glad we're talking about it now, is because single payer is becoming a litmus test in some ways. It's becoming a proxy over which your fealty to kind of progressivism is determined. And if that proxy battle goes to the left, if the left wins that battle, they are then in the place that the Republicans are in now. They fought a proxy battle within their own ranks over repeal of Obamacare. It became you had to say that you were for repealing Obamacare if you were going to be a Republican in good standing. So everyone became one. They then took power. They were then faced with actually executing on the thing that they had been promising their base. Now that they are failing to deliver on it, they are engendering all sorts of cynicism among their base. And I worry that if the left doesn't start thinking about it more, that you'll see the same kind of cynicism when people start to realize, wait a minute, everybody says they're for this, but we're not getting it. What's going on?
That's a great point. My graduate school education was in public administration, so I know that not only is ideology and principle important, but so is competence. So is actually administering the program that you're out to administer. And I think that's honestly part of what happened in Vermont. Vermont's both houses of the legislature passed a single-payer bill, and the governor used as an excuse the fact that they didn't include a pay-for to not develop his own pay-for. Now, I think that was just an excuse. I think ideologically he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to take on the interest. But he had that excuse because they didn't do their legwork, right? It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that voters don't support it, that people don't support it. We say it's a left-wing thing, but a lot of people who aren't on the left like single-payer. A lot more people like Medicare than they like Obamacare. But if the left is going to be sort of the ideological hive mind here, it needs to do all of its legwork and all of its homework as it's getting these bills through.
Sure. And single payer has been talked about a lot on TYT, so I'm curious what people, Eric, what people think about David's story. Oh, and it's called, go check it out. It's called California Single Payer Organizers Are Deceiving Their Supporters.
Okay.
Typically nuanced headline that I like to go with.
That's your headline?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Writers don't write their own headlines. That's the.
I know about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. Kate Caninella says Democrats are the worst. They don't want single payer because the current system is their biggest donors. But I want to give you another point from. Hold on. Okay, Carrie Proca says there's a big difference between state single payer and national single payer. Governor Brown is correct, and I think he's talking about how the Trump administration would basically have to sign on for this to actually be funded.
Yeah, and this is another point that David mentions, that you can't just do this. California can't just up and create a single-payer system without sign-off from HHS, I believe it is.
Well, the ACA does have a provision that allows states to have basically a waiver from Obamacare. So, like, actually, if
who would grant the waiver?
Well, actually, it's funny. If they actually did succeed in repealing the ACA in its total, which I don't think they will, but if they did, then that would no longer be an issue. It's actually only an issue because of the ACA. But yeah, the HHS has to grant the waiver.
There was some. The other question. I mean, it wasn't really a question; it was an assertion, and it's a true one. That the Democratic Party is its politics are heavily driven by funding from the incumbent industries in the healthcare field. Zed has a piece up today, though, about how those politics are not immutable. Cory Booker, who has been the senator from Big Pharma, New Jersey, his entire career, has taken an inordinate sum of money from them, has supported them throughout the years, been an ally of the industry. Today said he's going to pause, interesting term, but we'll take it, pause taking money from the pharmaceutical industry because of all the criticism that he was getting. And he even referred to the drug industry as, quote, folks who profit off the backs of sick people. And this is from, not because they're getting money from a counter kind of industry. This is because the Democratic base is kind of rising up in opposition to this sorts of politics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly the point. And, some people, I think they look at this and they say, hey, we don't trust Cory Booker. He's not a good guy. That's not the point, right? I think he's a cynical opportunist, too, for many different dimensions. But the fact of the matter is that now that he views the opportunity as siding with us rather than siding with lobbyists, that's a victory for us. It has nothing really to do with him. It's a victory of our organizing and our activism, of Frederick Douglass's, slogan that in power concedes nothing without demand, never has and never will.
Right. Cool. All right. Unless we've got anything else, that's Oh, we got one. All right. We'll do another one then. And I don't see the Secret Service anywhere.
Hello, my name's Noor Darwish, and since someone asked for a woman's voice, here's a woman's voice. So, Kate Catanella says Booker is a fraud now, and before he became senator, he profits off the back of a lot of people in many respects. That was it.
Do you want to answer that, since they wanted to? So wait, what was the question exactly? Booker's a fraud?
Yeah.
Well, so Booker's a politician is the phrase that I would use for it. I think people have more faith in politicians than I tend to.
Sorry,
I would like to apologize. That was the wrong question. Sam Drummer asks, where has the discussion on the angle of CA single payer been before now? There is so much anger and confusion about this.
Where the what single payer?
Where has the discussion of the angle of CA single payer?
CA single payer?
Yeah.
The California single payer?
Where's the discussion been?
Where has it been before this?
Oh, so it's interesting. This is another reason why I take a little bit of the opposite angle of David, is that under Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was the governor of California, Democrats there passed this exact, fairly similar legislation twice, right? And now a lot of those same people are like, I don't know if we should pass it or not. So that's another reason why, example with Cory Booker.
It's like how Republicans passed Obamacare repeal 50 whatever times, right, because they knew that Obama was going to veto the repeal. Now that they have somebody who's going to sign it, they're like,
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And that's why you have to keep on these people and do politics year-round and do it at every level. Figure out who your local people are. Figure out who your state reps are, who your member of Congress is. It isn't all about President Trump. He's obviously a very important person, but at every level of politics, you have to be engaged and keep these people in line. And I think if we were doing that, we would have seen a better solution on healthcare from a lot of places by now.
Okay, so there's another point that you guys didn't bring up that I hope you can address.
Sure.
So just yesterday, you were talking about how Mitch McConnell, basically, it cares more about winning elections than anything to do with health care. He's just trying to do what will help his party win. That's why he's upset at Trump for the Dean Heller attack ad, okay? So this article in the LA Times, it's by George Skelton. He's a reporter, but he wrote an opinion piece, and he says that Anthony Rendon is protecting Democrats from a tough vote by slowing the process down. He says he's going to do it next year, or he wants to do it next year. So I want you to address that, and also the thing I texted you. Why couldn't Anthony Rendon have put this in committee and said, well, okay, we're going to do our own version in the assembly and figure out how to fund it?
Right. So he certainly could have done that. And if he was trying to get us to a place where single payer is actually implemented in law, maybe he does do something like that. And it would need the entire time a provision that says this is going to have to go to the voters in order to change the Constitution, at which point you probably want to wait until 2020 when you have presidential level turnout, so you're 3 years out at that point. But then you're also going to face a couple $100 million onslaught from the industry that you're suggesting, you're basically deposing. But yes, he could have done that, right? He could have said, we're going to continue working on this.
Right.
We're going to be serious about it. As we're serious about it, public policy shops will produce papers about it. Economists will study it. Health economists will study it.
I mean, this is fundamentally the issue. So, a friend of mine, Matt Brunig, who's a policy writer, he makes this point. There's no national think tank that has put out a single-payer paper, right? Like, theoretically, on a grassroots level, we know most Americans support this type of program, but we don't have sort of the intellectual basis and the policy framework to implement it. And I think that's the really important part. And I don't think Rendon is acting in good faith. I think he's trying to block it because he thinks it's a hassle and a lot of interest would come after him if he didn't block it. But I also think that the proponents need to be well-armed when they're doing this. And I think that's a lot of what Dave Dayen's point was that I think is well-founded. I think that we need to be very well-armed in doing this. And a lot of the reason we're not, unfortunately, it does have to do with corruption. I think the Democratic Party doesn't want to set up serious policy shops to study this idea because they just don't want to take on the interest behind it. But we in our advocacy, we should come at it with both feet forward, I think was Dave Dayen's point.
So I was dealing with other technical things, so if you covered this already, stop me, but this LA Times piece that I just referenced also said that the cost of this program, single payer for the state of California, would actually be twice as much as the current budget for the entire state government. And then he goes on to say, if you could get the federal government to participate and basically take money out of Medicaid, out of Medicare, then that would supplement some of it. But then you'd be basically taking health care away from people who like what they have but aren't able to keep it.
That part's politically fraught, and it also goes back to, but it's doable, if you do a single-payer system, and it's...
Well, here's the thing about the cost that I think should be a really important point, and everyone, when you're arguing about this, you need to make this point to people. Yes, the government spends more money. Yes, taxes spend more money, but it's less money overall. So instead of paying your co-pays, premiums, and deductibles, you're paying a little bit more in taxes, and you're getting better health care, cheaper health care. And I think that's a point we need to keep stressing, because otherwise you're basically saying, hey, this is a big government spending number, so it's just too much money, when that's not true. You're taking a lot less money in the private sector to do this. So I think that, it saves money overall, and that's the point you need to keep stressing over and over and over so that people don't think, wow, we're just spending $200 billion more, and that's just way too much money.
Unfortunately, then it comes back to Dayen's point, which is that if you're spending $200 billion more, even if you're saving money over the long run, that's still $200 billion in taxes that you have to raise, and by the Constitution, you have to actually raise $400 billion so that 50% of that can go to the schools. You know what? Probably need that. You could probably find $200 billion worth of need in the schools and in the community colleges around California. So maybe that can be their move, but now all of a sudden you're talking about asking taxpayers for $400 billion in a state that is very good at turning voters out to vote against tax increases.
Well, here's the thing. People are willing to pay for taxes if they know they're going to get something good for it. I think the biggest, I'm from Cobb County, Georgia, one of the most conservative places in America. Every single time the T-SPLOS, which is a special tax to fund the schools, goes up for a vote, every single time it's won. It has never lost. The Tea Party and the Koch brothers organized against it. It didn't lose. And the reason why is because people trusted they were going to get something good for their community out of it. And I think that's a big part of how people have to...
Good schools in
that's
area.
Excellent schools. I went to one of the best high schools in America, actually, as a magnet school, and I was outside of my district. And that's what I'm saying about healthcare. When we're selling this, we have to make sure to let people know that, hey, you're going to get something great out of this. You vote for this, you'll never have to worry about healthcare bills ever again in your life. And that, I think, is a winning argument.
Okay. I know it's hot. Can you do one more thing? All right.
One more?
Yeah,
You got one more?
okay.
All right.
So, this is a fun one. Okay. Kathy Murphy, the Mercury News in Sacramento, so right where this is happening, wrote a piece about some of the really angry, sometimes violent threats that Anthony Rendon is receiving. And some of the imagery that involves knives, stabbing the California bear in the back.
Well, here, if people want to see it.
Okay. Cool. All right, so here's my question for you. Okay,
It's from the California Nurses Association, but it's just a metaphor of a knife in the back of the California bear. I mean,
Okay, but it wasn't that long ago that right over the river here we had someone shoot a member of
You know,
Congress.
liberals are too squeamish. People don't get triggered by stuff like this. People like have long time like
cartoon.
mental illness get triggered. But like this is
It's a
nothing.
cartoon.
Like this is a cartoon, guys. I mean, look at the Revolutionary War. Right after that, we had politicians like stabbing each other, shooting each other, punching each other. Teddy Roosevelt used to chase reporters around the Capitol so they'd get tired, so they couldn't ask him questions. Liberals need to stop being so damn squeamish, right? This is why they lose so much, right? Like that's my opinion on this.
Well, okay, this is a question for liberals. This is
Senator, what's his name? Foote from Mississippi pulled a gun on another senator in, like, what, 1849? Like, on the Senate floor.
I didn't get to finish my question though. Is the frame okay? All right. So this is the
Oh,
question.
and by the
All
way,
right.
my objection to this is that it's wrong, not that
There's
it's
no
it's
blood?
triggering.
Oh, okay. No, okay, yeah. Okay, so you don't agree with the spirit of the cartoon.
Right.
Some might not agree with the violent way in which it's depicted. But what I wanted to ask you guys are journalists who work for The Intercept, sort of the cutting edge of journalism. TYT is considered to be in that family. There's this place called Four Corners where there's 4 states that all intersect at one point. And I think really the 4 corners of media and journalism right now involve entertainment, activism, journalism, right? And now I'm going to do the
Oops.
Yeah, the oops. Okay, so entertainment, activism, journalism, punditry. The other one is punditry. Okay, so obviously TYT is a crazy mix of all of those things. And I wanted to first ask you guys where you come from in terms of those 4 quadrants, and then how that might impact the way you would report something. Because as an activist, for instance, saying he stabbed us in the back, Civil War, that's going to gain you Twitter followers, that's going to get people to sign petitions, that's going to create a protest. It might do all kinds of things that you would like to do as an activist. But as a journalist, you have to look and see, well, is this accurate first? And in TYT, we try to figure out which we are all the time. I'd love for you guys at The Intercept to chew on that.
I mean, I always think of myself as a journalist first, and a crusading journalist, if you want to go to that. What about you?
I mean, look, I try to be a reporter. I try to be fair to everyone, no matter who I'm writing about. But obviously, I have views. I put them out there so people know my bias. So,
Yeah, you're not going to be surprised if you follow me on Twitter. You're gonna know where I'm coming from. Thanks everybody for joining us. This has been fun, and we didn't get kicked out of here, but we're going to leave anyway because it's awfully hot and it's Friday.